My name is Ella Lopez, and I'm 28. In Miami, to the tycoon family that adopted me, I'm an embarrassment. To my adoptive mother, Eleonora, the queen of the fast fashion empire Glamour Pulse, my belief in sustainability was a joke, an insult to her power. So when my small brand unexpectedly became a success, she waged a war to destroy me. She didn't just attack my reputation. She spent millions to buy the land right out from under my partner, Marcus Vance, a textile mill owner in North Carolina, and then hit me with a bogus lawsuit designed to bleed me dry financially. She had me backed into a corner. But then, the last person I ever expected, my adoptive brother Julian, the one who always sneered at me, secretly handed me a USB drive. It wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon, holding every crime and dirty secret that built the Glamour Pulse empire. The son who always stood at her side had just handed me the dagger, because he was suffocating in that empire of lies himself. She taught me that in this world, only the ruthless survive. And now, the daughter she called an embarrassment is going to use that very lesson to burn her entire kingdom to the ground. I live a life stitched together from two completely different cloths. By day, I am the dutiful, quiet daughter of the Lopez family, a name that in Miami is synonymous with fast fashion. Our family empire, Glamour Pulse, is a colossus of polyester and fleeting trends, a machine that churns out 1 million garments a week and leaves a trail of environmental and ethical devastation in its wake. But by night, in the small, converted garage of my modest apartment far from the family's waterfront mansion, I am someone else entirely. I am the founder, designer, and sole full-time employee of TerraThread, a brand built on the very principles Glamour Pulse despises: sustainability, ethical sourcing, and timeless design. The Lopez dinner table is my personal battlefield. It's a long expanse of polished mahogany that feels more like a boardroom than a place for a family to connect. Tonight was no different. My adoptive mother, Eleonora, sat at the head of the table, a queen surveying her domain. Her diamonds caught the light of the chandelier, flashing with every calculated gesture. Opposite her, my father Richard was a shadow, his presence large but his voice small, perpetually eclipsed by his wife's ambition. And beside me, my brother Julian, the crown prince and heir to the empire, was scrolling through his phone, a smirk plastered on his face. "Julian, darling, tell us about the new influencer campaign," Eleonora said, her voice smooth as silk but with an edge of steel. "The numbers for the fall collection are already staggering." Julian looked up, his eyes gleaming. "We signed Lexi Monroe, 2 million followers. We sent her a box of our new Urban Jungle line yesterday. She posted one story wearing the snakeskin print bodysuit and it sold out in 3 hours. 3 hours. He leaned back, triumphant. "That's the future. Cheap, fast, and viral." "Excellent," Eleonora purred, taking a delicate sip of wine. She then turned her gaze to me, and the warmth in the room dropped 10 degrees. "And Ella, what have you been up to? Still, playing with your little fabrics?" The question was a dagger wrapped in velvet. It was the same question she'd been asking for years. I smoothed down the sleeve of my dress, a simple, elegant piece I'd made myself from organic hemp linen, dyed a deep indigo using traditional Japanese techniques. It was the antithesis of everything Glamour Pulse stood for. "My work is going well, thank you," I said, keeping my voice even. "I just finalized a partnership with a collective of artisans in Peru for hand-woven alpaca wool." Julian snorted. "Artisans? Ella, we have a factory in Bangladesh that employs 5,000 people. We call that scaling." "You call it what? A field trip?" "I call it paying a living wage, Julian," I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. "I call it preserving a craft instead of replacing it with a machine that pollutes a river." The air crackled with tension. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting between us. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but Eleonora cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Enough," she commanded. "Ella, we've been over this. Your idealism is quaint, but it doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't build an empire. We gave you the Lopez name, an education, a life anyone would kill for. And you choose to spend your days in a garage making clothes that 5 people can afford. It's an embarrassment." "It's my choice," I said quietly, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. "A poor one," she concluded, turning her attention back to Julian. The conversation moved on to logistics, supply chains, and profit margins, a language I understood perfectly but refused to speak. I was an outsider at my own family's table, the adopted girl who never quite fit, the one who saw the rot beneath the gilded surface. They had given me everything except the one thing I craved, the right to be different. I escaped as soon as dinner was over, the familiar excuses tumbling from my lips. Early morning, meeting with a supplier. They didn't care enough to ask for details. Driving away from the palatial estate, with its perfectly manicured lawns and sterile white walls, felt like coming up for air. The real me lived 20 miles west, in a world of buzzing sewing machines, sketches pinned to cork boards, and the earthy smell of natural dyes. My studio was my sanctuary. Racks of clothes made from linen, organic cotton, and tencel lined one wall. Jars of pigments and swatches of fabric covered my work tables. This was where Terra Thread was born. It started as a secret act of rebellion, a way to create the kind of fashion I wished existed in the world. I poured every dollar I had from a small trust left by my biological grandmother into it. My best friend and part-time business manager, Sophia, was waiting for me, hunched over a laptop, a determined frown on her face. She was the only one who knew the full extent of my double life. "Bad dinner?" she asked without looking up. "Is there any other kind?" I sighed, dropping my keys into a ceramic bowl. Julian just broke another sales record with a bodysuit made from plastic. Eleonora called my life's work quaint. Sophia finally looked up, her eyes flashing. Let them choke on their polyester. While they were busy patting themselves on the back, I was busy getting us featured on The Conscious Closet, the biggest ethical fashion blog in the country. The post goes live tomorrow morning. My heart skipped a beat. "You're kidding. How?" "I've been emailing the editor, Chloe Vance, for 6 months. I sent her the Althea dress. She loved it. She called us a quiet revolution in a world of noise." We stared at each other for a moment, a slow grin spreading across both our faces. This was it. This was the break we had been working toward, sleeping 3 hours a night for. This was more than just a blog post, it was validation. It was a signal that we weren't just a quaint hobby, we were a real brand. The next morning, my phone started buzzing and didn't stop. The blog post was a sensation. Orders flooded our small online store, more than we'd ever had in a single month. My designs, my philosophy, my quiet rebellion, it was resonating with people. People were tired of clothes that fell apart after 2 washes. They were hungry for something real. I spent the day packing orders with Sophia, the mood in the studio electric. We were a 2-woman operation trying to handle the workload of a team of 20, but we were euphoric. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that Terra Thread could be more than just my personal sanctuary. It could be my future. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Ella Lopez?" a man's voice asked. It was deep and kind. "It is. Who's calling?" "My name is Marcus Vance. I own a small textile mill in North Carolina. We specialize in organic, American-milled cotton. My daughter, Chloe, runs a blog. She wrote about your company this morning. What you're doing, it's what I've been trying to support for 30 years. I'd like to work with you." I nearly dropped the phone. Marcus Vance was a legend in the sustainable fashion community. His mill was one of the last of its kind, a beacon of ethical production in a sea of outsourcing. To work with him was a dream. "Mr. Vance, I would be honored," I stammered. "Please call me Marcus. I have a feeling we're going to be great partners, Ella." Hanging up the phone, I felt a profound sense of rightness. I was building something piece by piece, a network of people who believed in the same things I did, a family of a different sort. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The feature on The Conscious Closet had a snowball effect. Other blogs, magazines, and even a few small boutiques started reaching out. We were selling out of every piece as soon as we could make it. I had to hire 2 part-time seamstresses just to keep up. Sophia was drawing up business plans, talking about investors and scaling. It was thrilling and terrifying. I was still hiding all of it from my family. I'd come to dinner wearing my own designs, and they wouldn't even notice, their eyes trained to see only designer labels. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. I was becoming a success in a world they didn't even know existed. One evening, I was sketching a new design when my father, Richard, appeared at the door of my apartment. He never visited. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had he found out? He looked out of place in my small, cluttered living room, his expensive suit a stark contrast to my bohemian decor. "Ella," he said, his voice unusually hesitant. I was in the neighborhood. It was a clumsy lie. No one was ever in the neighborhood by accident. "Is everything okay, Dad?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer right away. He walked over to a rack where a few Terra Thread pieces were hanging. He reached out and touched the sleeve of a jacket made from a unique, textured fabric woven from recycled denim. "This is impressive," he murmured, his back still to me. "The craftsmanship." I was stunned into silence. He had never once shown any interest in my work. He finally turned to face me, his expression unreadable. There's a new boutique opening in the design district. Elysian Fields. Very exclusive, very high-end. They focus on sustainable luxury. The owner is an old friend. I mentioned your brand to her. She wants to see your collection. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father, the silent partner in Eleonora's fast fashion crusade, was helping me. Why? The word slipped out before I could stop it. Richard looked down at his hands, a flicker of something, regret, sadness, in his eyes. Before I met your mother, I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to build things that would last, things with integrity. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. Glamour Pulse, it's not that. What you're doing here, Ella, this has integrity. He didn't stay long. He handed me a business card with the boutique owner's name on it and left as quietly as he had arrived. I stood in the middle of my living room for a long time, the card clutched in my hand. For the first time, I felt a crack in the wall I had built between myself and my family. My father saw me. He actually saw me. The meeting with Elysian Fields went better than I could have imagined. The owner, a chic woman named Isabelle, fell in love with my collection. She wanted an exclusive. The order she placed was larger than all our previous orders combined. It was the kind of validation that could put a brand on the map in a city like Miami. But as I drove home, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. The design district was Eleonora's territory. She lunched there. She shopped there. She held court there. For Tara Thread to have a presence in a boutique like Elysian Fields was to step out of the garage and onto her stage. It was a declaration of war I wasn't sure I was ready to fight. Sophia, however, was ecstatic. This is it. This is the moment we pivot from a niche online brand to a real luxury player. We need to hire a proper team, find a bigger studio. Ella, we can't play small anymore. Eleonora is going to find out, Soph, I warned, my voice low. You don't understand what she's like. She doesn't tolerate competition, especially from me. So what? Sophia challenged, her hands on her hips. Are you going to hide in this garage forever? You're building an empire of your own, one that you can actually be proud of. It's time to own it. She was right. I couldn't let my fear of Eleonora hold me back. I had come too far. I called Isabelle and confirmed the order. We had 6 weeks to produce the collection. It was a monumental task, but the entire team, small as it was, rallied. Marcus Vance overnighted us his finest materials. My seamstresses worked extra hours. Sophia handled the logistics with military precision. I lived on coffee and 3 hours of sleep, but I felt more alive than ever. The day of the launch, my stomach was in knots. The Elysian Fields boutique looked stunning. My collection was displayed in the front window, beautifully lit and styled. It looked like it belonged. I stood across the street, watching shoppers go in, too nervous to get any closer. Then I saw her. Eleonora's black town car pulled up to the curb. She stepped out, followed by Julian. They were on their way to one of their favorite lunch spots next door. I held my breath, my heart pounding. She paused, her eyes scanning the street, and then they landed on the window display of Elysian Fields. She stopped dead. I could see her lean forward, her eyes narrowing as she took in the clothes. She saw the familiar lines, the unique fabrics. She then looked at the small, elegant sign in the corner of the display, Tara Thread by Ella Lopez. Her face, for a fleeting moment, was a mask of disbelief. It was quickly replaced by a cold, hard fury I knew all too well. She turned to Julian, her mouth moving, her gestures sharp and angry. He looked at the display, then back at her, a look of smug amusement on his face. The war had begun, and I was standing right in the middle of the battlefield. That night, the first attack came. A prominent fashion blogger, one who was notoriously on Glamour Pulse's payroll, posted a scathing review of Tara Thread. She called my designs derivative, my materials deceptively cheap, and my brand's sustainable claims unverified and likely fraudulent. She twisted Chloe Vance's phrase, calling us a loud noise in a world of quiet revolutionaries. The comments section filled with vitriol from fake accounts. It was a classic Eleonora move, a public takedown designed to discredit and destroy. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How can she just lie like that? I asked Sophia, scrolling through the hateful comments on my phone. Because it's what she does, Sophia said, her voice grim. She can't compete on merit, so she competes on mud. We need to respond. We'll send them our certifications, our supplier manifests. It won't matter, I interrupted, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. Her followers don't want the truth. They want the drama. The next day, 2 of the small boutiques that carried our collection called to cancel their orders. They were spooked by the negative press. The dream that had felt so real just 24 hours ago was starting to crumble. I was playing a game against a master, and she had written all the rules. But then, something unexpected happened. Chloe Vance, from the Conscious Closet, posted a fiery defense of Terra thread on her blog and social media. She systematically debunked every claim made by the paid blogger, providing links to our suppliers and explaining the certification processes. She ended her post with a call to action. In a world of fast fashion lies, supporting a brand with integrity like Terra Thread isn't just a purchase, it's a statement. #stand with Terra Thread. The hashtag took off. Our real customers, the ones who had followed us from the beginning, rallied to our defense. They posted pictures of themselves in our clothes, talking about the quality, the feel of the fabric, the story behind the brand. Marcus Vance issued a statement from his mill, verifying our partnership and vouching for my integrity. Even Isabel from Elysian Fields posted a video from her store, showcasing the collection and calling the attack a pathetic attempt by the old guard to stifle new talent. By the end of the week, our sales had tripled. The attack had backfired spectacularly. Eleonora had meant to bury us, but instead, she had given us a platform and a cause. She had shown the world exactly who we were fighting against. I knew it wouldn't be the end. This was just the opening salvo. Eleonora would not take this defeat lying down. She would come back harder, smarter. But as I stood in my studio, surrounded by bolts of organic fabric and the hum of sewing machines, I felt a new kind of resolve. I wasn't just a designer anymore. I was a fighter, and I was ready for the next round. I was no longer the quiet, invisible daughter. I was the CEO of a company she had tried to destroy, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly powerful. The battle for the soul of fashion was on, and I was on the front lines. The victory was sweet, but it had the metallic taste of a coming storm. We had won a battle of public opinion, but I knew Eleonora's pride was a fortress, and I had just thrown a rock at its walls. She wouldn't just retaliate, she would escalate. She wouldn't attack my reputation again. That had failed. She would come for the foundation. She would come for my supply chain. For a few weeks, an unnerving quiet settled over us. Terra Thread was flourishing in the spotlight. Elysian Fields sold out of the initial collection in 10 days and placed a second, even larger order. We were hiring, expanding, moving out of the garage and into a proper studio space in the Wynwood Arts District. It was a sun-drenched loft with high ceilings and polished concrete floors, a space that felt like a real headquarters for our quiet revolution. I allowed myself to breathe, to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had overestimated her fury. That was my mistake. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was Marcus Vance. His voice, usually so warm and steady, was strained. "Ella, we have a problem," he said, no preamble. "A big one." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. "Marcus, what is it? What's wrong?" "The holding company that owns the land my mill is on, they've been bought out. Some anonymous LLC based out of Delaware. They've terminated my lease. They gave me 90 days to vacate the premises." The world tilted on its axis. "What? They can't do that. You've been there for generations." "Apparently they can," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "The original lease had an acquisition clause. My grandfather signed it 50 years ago. Never thought anything of it. It's ironclad. I've had my lawyer look at it. There's no way out." I sank into my chair, my mind racing. 90 days. His mill wasn't just a building. It was an ecosystem of custom machinery, skilled workers, and decades of institutional knowledge. You couldn't just pack it up and move it. This would destroy him, and it would destroy us. Marcus's mill was the heart of Terra Thread. His unique, organic textiles were our signature. "Who is it, Marcus? Who is the LLC?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It's a ghost. Tracing the paperwork is a nightmare of shell corporations. But the money is loud, Ella. And it's coming from Miami." Glamour Pulse. It had Eleonora's fingerprints all over it. It was a brilliant, cruel, and brutally effective move. She couldn't buy his loyalty, so she bought the ground right out from under him. "I'll fix this," I said, the words feeling hollow even to me. "Ella, my dear, this isn't your fight," he said gently. "I called to warn you. You need to start looking for another supplier. I don't want you going down with my ship." After I hung up, I sat in silence, the bustling energy of our new studio fading into a dull roar. Sophia came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "What is it?" I told her everything. Her face paled. "She's trying to cut off our oxygen," Sophia breathed, her strategic mind immediately grasping the full scope of the attack. "Without Marcus, we don't have a product. At least not the one we've built our name on. We'll have to source from overseas. The lead times, the quality control, our entire brand ethos is on the line." I'm not giving up on him, I said, a fierce protectiveness rising in my chest. He stood by us. We stand by him. There has to be a way. That weekend, I went to the Lopez mansion for the obligatory Sunday brunch. I needed to see her. I needed to look her in the eye. I found her in the garden, directing a team of landscapers with the precision of a general. Julian was lounging by the pool, a cocktail in hand. "Ella," he called out, a lazy grin on his face. "Come to slum it with the family? I heard you moved into a new office. Trying to play with the big kids now?" I ignored him and walked straight to Eleonora. "I want to talk to you." She turned, feigning surprise. "Ella, darling, what a pleasant surprise. You look stressed. Is the pressure of running a— what is it you call it? A brand? Is it getting to be too much for you? You bought the land Marcus Vance's mill is on," I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I have no idea what you're talking about. My investment portfolio is far too complex for me to be bothered with minor real estate transactions in North Carolina." The denial was so smooth, so practiced, it was more damning than a confession. "You're going to destroy a good man's life, his family's legacy, just to get back at me?" She finally dropped the pretense. Her eyes turned to ice. "Let me be clear. There is only room for one Lopez empire in this city. You were given a choice, to be a part of it or to be irrelevant. You chose to be a competitor, and I do not tolerate competition. I crush it. That man, whatever his name is, he's just collateral damage. It's not personal, it's business." "There's nothing business about this," I shot back. "It's a vendetta, it's petty and it's cruel." Julian sauntered over, swirling the ice in his glass. "Oh, lighten up, Ella. It's the cost of doing business. You play in the big leagues, you get big league problems. Your artisan friend couldn't adapt. Survival of the fittest, that's the first rule of the fashion jungle." He smirked. "Maybe you should stick to your knitting circles." I felt a surge of fury so hot it almost blinded me. "You think this is a game?" "Of course it's a game," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "And we're winning." I turned my back on them and walked away, their laughter echoing behind me. I drove straight to my father's office in the Glamour Pulse headquarters. He was the only one left, my last, desperate hope. I found him in his vast, minimalist office overlooking the bay. He was staring at a blueprint, a model of a building on his desk, the architect he never became. "Dad, I need your help," I said, closing the door behind me. He looked up, startled. When he saw my face, his own fell. "You heard about the mill." It wasn't a question. "You knew," I whispered, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over me. "You knew and you didn't tell me?" "I only found out yesterday," he said, standing up and walking to the window. "Eleonora, she has her own investment team. She keeps me out of these kinds of acquisitions. So you're just going to let her do it?" I demanded, my voice rising. "You told me you valued integrity. You said what I was building mattered. Was that a lie?" He turned from the window, his face etched with a deep, familiar pain. "It's not that simple, Ella. Your mother, she controls the majority shares in this company. My position, our lifestyle, Julian's future, it's all tied to her. If I cross her on this," he trailed off, gesturing vaguely around the opulent office. "So you'll do nothing. You'll stand by and watch her destroy an innocent man, destroy my company, everything I've worked for because you're afraid of her." "I'm not afraid," he snapped, his voice cracking. "I'm realistic, I'm a pragmatist, I can't win this fight for you." "I'm not asking you to win it for me," I cried, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. "I'm asking you to fight with me, I am your daughter. And Julian is my son," he shot back. "He's my heir, this company is his birthright. I can't jeopardize that for your project." The word hung in the air between us. Project. Not a business, not a passion, not a life's work, just a project. In that moment, I saw him with blinding clarity. He wasn't a secret ally. He was a prisoner, and his cage was made of gold. His one act of defiance, telling me about the boutique, was as far as he was willing to go. "I see," I said, my voice suddenly calm, all the fight draining out of me, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. "I'm on my own. Ella, please try to understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, turning to leave. "I understand that integrity is a nice idea until it costs you something." I walked out of his office, out of the Glamour Pulse building, and didn't look back. The last flicker of hope that my family could be redeemed had been extinguished. They were not just my competitors, they were my enemies. Back at the studio, Sophia was waiting. "Any luck?" she asked, her expression hopeful. I just shook my head. "No. We're alone in this." We spent the next hour in a grim silence, the reality of our situation sinking in. We had 87 days until our supply of fabric was cut off permanently. "We could try to find another mill," Sophia said finally, her voice devoid of its usual energy. "There are a few in Europe, maybe one in Japan." "It's not the same," I said, shaking my head. "Marcus's cotton, his process, it's part of our story. It's authentic. If we just replace him, Eleonora wins. She proves that everything, even ethics, is disposable. I walked over to the design board, covered in sketches for the next collection, a collection that might never be made. I stared at the drawings, at the flowing lines and intricate details that all depended on a fabric I could no longer get. Despair was a heavy cloak, but underneath it, a tiny ember of defiance began to glow. I thought of Marcus, of his life's work. I thought of my team, who had poured their hearts into this brand. I thought of the promise I had made to myself in that garage, to build something different, something better. Eleonora thought she could buy and sell the world, that everything had a price. Julian thought it was all a game. My father thought it was a fight he couldn't win. They were all wrong. What if we bought the mill? I said, the words coming out of my mouth before I had even fully formed the thought. Sophia stared at me as if I had grown a second head. With what money? The LLC that bought the land is backed by Glamourpulse. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. We just signed a lease on this studio, Ella. We have payroll to make. We have a few $100,000 in the bank, tops. I know, I said, my mind starting to race, the ember glowing brighter. But they bought the land, not the mill itself, not the equipment, not the business. If we could find a new location, a new piece of land, we could help Marcus move. We could finance it. The logistics are a nightmare, Sophia argued, though I could see a spark of interest in her eyes. And the cost, it's still millions we don't have. So we get it, I said, my voice gaining strength. We find investors, people who believe in what we're doing, people who want to invest in something real, not in a soulless machine like Glamourpulse. We'll turn this attack into our origin story. We won't just be a fashion brand, we'll be a movement. It was insane. It was impossible. It was a Hail Mary pass in the final second of the game, but it was the only move we had left. It was the only way to fight back not on their terms, but on ours. First things first, I said, grabbing my laptop. I'm booking a flight. To where? Sophia asked, bewildered. To North Carolina, I replied, a fierce determination hardening my voice. I'm going to see Marcus. I'm not letting his ship go down, and if we're going to build a lifeboat, I need to talk to the captain. The flight to Asheville was short, but the landscape that unfolded beneath me felt a world away from the glitz and concrete of Miami. Rolling green hills gave way to the dense forests of the Blue Ridge Mountains. This was the heart of American textile country, a place with a soul, a history. It was everything Glamourpulse was not. Marcus met me at the small airport. He looked older than he had on our video calls, the stress of the past week having carved new lines around his eyes. But his handshake was firm, his smile, though weary, was genuine. You shouldn't have come, Ella, he said as we walked to his pickup truck. This isn't your burden to bear. When someone tries to burn down your house, you don't just stand by and watch because your neighbor's house is on fire too, I replied. You grab a bucket. We're in this together, Marcus. He took me to the mill. It was nestled in a small valley, a rambling brick building that seemed to have grown out of the earth itself. The air hummed with the rhythmic clatter of looms, a sound that was like a heartbeat. Inside, generations of machinery worked in harmony, weaving raw cotton into threads, threads into bolts of the beautiful, high-quality fabric that was the lifeblood of Terra thread. Workers, many of whom had parents and grandparents who had worked in this very same mill, moved with a practiced, easy grace. This wasn't just a factory, it was a community, and Eleonora was trying to bulldoze it out of spite. We spent the day talking. I walked the floor with him, met his team, felt the textures of the different fabrics. He showed me the archives, leather-bound books filled with fabric swatches dating back to the early 20th century. He was a historian, a craftsman, and a businessman, all rolled into one. The more I saw, the more my resolve hardened. That evening, we sat on the porch of his family home, a simple farmhouse overlooking the valley. His wife, Sarah, brought us iced tea. So, he said, looking out at the mill, its lights twinkling in the dusk, you have that look in your eye, the one my daughter gets when she's about to try something crazy. I took a deep breath. I want to help you move the mill, Marcus. I want to help you buy a new piece of land, set up a new facility. Terra Thread will be your primary partner and an equity investor in the new venture. He was silent for a long time, staring into the distance. Ella, I appreciate the sentiment more than you know. But we're talking about a multi-million-dollar operation. The logistics of moving this machinery, some of these looms are 100 years old. You can't just call a moving company. And the land, where would we even go? We'll find a place, I said, leaning forward, my voice filled with a conviction I didn't entirely feel. And we'll find the money. There are people out there, impact investors, people who are tired of the Glamourpulse way of doing things. They want to invest in the future, and this is the future. a transparent, ethical, American-made supply chain. We'll sell them the story, our story, a story of resilience. It's a beautiful story, he said softly, but it might be a fairy tale. Fairy tales have dragons, I countered, and we've already met ours. Now we just have to figure out how to slay it. I stayed in North Carolina for 3 days. We met with real estate agents looking at potential sites. We talked to engineering firms about the feasibility of moving the looms. The numbers were staggering, the challenges immense. On my last night, Marcus introduced me to someone. Ella, this is Ben Carter, he said, as a man with a kind face and a sharp suit joined us for dinner. Ben's an old family friend. He's also a financial advisor who specializes in ethical investments. I laid out my crazy plan for Ben. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him about my family, about Glamour Pulse, about Eleonora's attack. I showed him Terra Thread's growth, our projections, our vision for a fully integrated, sustainable fashion ecosystem with a relocated mill at its core. He listened intently, asking sharp, insightful questions. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair. The risk is astronomical, he said bluntly. You're a startup going to war with an industry giant. Your supply chain is compromised. You're trying to finance a multi-million-dollar industrial relocation with no tangible assets to leverage. On paper, this is one of the worst investment proposals I've ever seen. My heart sank. But, he continued, a slow smile spreading across his face, I've also never seen a proposal with more heart or a clearer moral imperative. The market for sustainable goods is exploding. Consumers are demanding transparency. What you're calling a fairy tale, Ella, I call a massive market opportunity wrapped in a David and Goliath narrative. And investors love a good David and Goliath story. He couldn't promise anything, but he said he would start making some calls. He would put together a pitch deck. For the first time, my impossible plan had a flicker of validation from the world of finance. I flew back to Miami with a sliver of hope. Back at the studio, Sophia had been working her own magic. She had mapped out a new business plan, a dozen different financial models, and a list of potential investors to target. While you were charming the country folk, I've been preparing for war, she announced, pointing to a massive whiteboard covered in charts and figures. If we're going to do this, we need to look like we can. We need to act like the multi-million-dollar company we plan to be. Our first official pitch meeting was a week later, via video call. It was with a venture capital fund out of San Francisco that Ben had connected us with. They were known for backing disruptive, mission-driven companies. I was more nervous than I had ever been in my life. I sat beside Sophia in our small conference room, our pitch deck loaded on the screen. For 30 minutes, we laid out our vision. We didn't just sell them a fashion brand, we sold them a new way of doing business. We sold them integrity as a commodity. The questions were relentless. They picked apart our numbers, questioned our logistics, challenged our timeline. I felt like I was defending a thesis for a degree in a subject I had just invented. When it was over, we were exhausted. How do you think it went? I asked Sophia, my voice hoarse. Honestly, I have no idea, she said, closing her laptop. They were completely unreadable. We didn't have to wait long. Ben called an hour later. They're in, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. They are. They're in for a seed round of $5 million, he said. Conditional on us securing a new site for the mill within the next 60 days. They're wiring $100,000 in good faith money tomorrow to cover due diligence costs. Sophia and I just stared at each other, speechless. $5 million. It wasn't everything we needed, but it was a start. A massive, game-changing start. It was real. The news lit a fire under us. We had 60 days. The pressure was immense. I was flying back and forth to North Carolina every week. We scouted dozens of locations, finally settling on a defunct furniture factory about 50 miles from Marcus's current location. It had the right infrastructure, a solid foundation, and access to a skilled local workforce. We began the long, arduous process of negotiation and inspection. Meanwhile, back in Miami, the clock was ticking. Our inventory was running low. The 60 days we had with our investors were also the last 60 days of Marcus's lease. Eleonora's deadline was looming. I continued to attend the Sunday brunches, playing the part of the dutiful daughter. The silence from Eleonora and Julian about my business was deafening. They thought they had won. They thought they were just waiting for me to wither and die on the vine. They had no idea I was trying to transplant the entire vineyard. One afternoon, I was at the new site in North Carolina with Marcus and a team of engineers when my phone rang. It was Julian. "Little sister," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm calling to offer a truce." I was immediately suspicious. What kind of truce? Let's just say Mom is getting bored of this little game. It was fun for a while, but the outcome is inevitable. So, here's the deal. Glamour Pulse is launching a conscious collection. Total greenwashing nonsense, of course, but the press will eat it up. We need a designer to be the face of it. Someone with a bit of, what's the word, authenticity. I felt sick. You want me to work for you? It's a great opportunity. You'd have an unlimited budget. We'd put your name on everything. Glamour Pulse Conscious, designed by Ella Lopez. It has a nice ring to it, don't you think? You get to keep playing with your little eco fabrics and we get the good PR. Everybody wins. And what about Marcus Vance? I asked, my voice cold. Who? Oh, the mill guy. Yeah, that's unfortunate, but business is business. He'll find something else to do. No, I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What do you mean no? The answer is no, Julian. I would rather watch every last piece of Terra thread burn than have my name associated with your company. You're making a huge mistake, Ella, he hissed. This is your last chance. The offer is off the table after this call. You'll be left with nothing. No supplier, no inventory, no brand. I'll take my chances, I said, and hung up the phone. I looked around at the dusty, empty factory, at the hopeful faces of Marcus and the engineers. I had just turned down a golden parachute, an easy way out. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had made the right choice. My name was not for sale. My integrity was not a line item in a budget. The deal for the new factory closed with 3 weeks to spare. The $5 million from our investors came through. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. We immediately began the Herculean task of planning the relocation. 2 weeks before Marcus's eviction deadline, I was in Miami for a board meeting with our new investors when Sophia burst into the room, her face ashen. "We've been served," she said, holding up a legal document. "Served with what?" I asked, my blood running cold. "A cease and desist letter from Glamour Pulse's lawyers." I took the letter. It was full of dense legal jargon, but the message was clear. Glamour Pulse was suing Terra Thread for trademark infringement. They claimed that our signature, Althea Dress Design, was a direct copy of a dress from their 2018 spring collection. It was a lie, a complete and utter fabrication. I had the original sketches, the date stamps, the metadata. My design predated theirs by over a year, but this wasn't about the truth. It was about tying us up in legal battles, draining our newfound resources, and scaring our investors. It was Eleonora's checkmate. A lawsuit, even a frivolous one, could be enough to make our backers pull out. "They can't be serious," one of our investors said, reading the document over my shoulder. "This is baseless." "It doesn't have to have a basis," I said, the bitter reality dawning on me. "It just has to be expensive." And she knows we can't afford a protracted legal fight with a billion-dollar corporation. The elation of the past few weeks evaporated, replaced by a familiar, sickening dread. Eleonora hadn't been idle. She hadn't been waiting for us to die. She had been waiting for us to have something worth taking, something she could bleed dry. She hadn't just come for my supply chain. Now, she was coming for the heart of the company itself, my designs. And this time, I had no idea how to fight back. The lawsuit landed like a bomb in the middle of our operations. The elation of securing the funding and the new mill site evaporated, replaced by the cold, suffocating fog of legal warfare. Our investors, while publicly supportive, were privately nervous. The conditional clause in our agreement was clear. Any material threat to the business could halt further funding. A frivolous lawsuit from a corporate giant like Glamour Pulse was the very definition of a material threat. Our lawyers confirmed our worst fears. "They don't have a case, Ella," said David Chen, our sharp, young attorney. "But they have something better, unlimited resources. They can bury us in motions, depositions, and discovery requests. They'll bleed you dry before you ever see the inside of a courtroom. That's the strategy. It's legal bullying." "So what are our options?" Sophia asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "You can try to settle," David said. "They'll likely demand you pull the design and issue a public apology. It would be a huge blow to your brand's image." "Absolutely not," I said, my voice firm. "I will not apologize for something I didn't do. Eleonora is not getting a victory on a lie." "Then we fight," David said. "But it's going to cost you, a lot, and it's going to take time you don't have." The first few legal bills were staggering. It was money that was supposed to go towards the mill relocation, towards hiring, towards new materials. Instead, it was being funneled into a black hole of retainers and filing fees. The clock was ticking not just on Marcus's eviction, but on our own solvency. I felt trapped, outmaneuvered. Eleonora had found my Achilles heel. She knew I wouldn't compromise my integrity, and she was using that very integrity as a weapon against me. One evening, I was working late at the studio, staring at a mountain of legal documents that made no sense to me when an email popped up. The sender's address was a string of random letters and numbers. There was no subject line. Hesitantly, I clicked it open. The body of the email contained a single attachment, a scanned document. It was a design file from Glamour Pulse's internal server. It showed the dress they were claiming I copied. But this file included metadata, the digital fingerprint of its creation, and the date stamp on the file was from March 2019. My design, the Althea dress, had first been posted on my small, personal blog in November 2017. My heart started to pound. This was it. This was the proof. This was the smoking gun that could get the entire case thrown out. But where had it come from? I scrolled down. There was one line of text at the bottom of the email. They have a pattern of this. Look deeper. JJ, it couldn't be. Julian? The crown prince of cynicism, the one who had laughed in my face? It made no sense. Why would he help me? Was it a trap? I immediately forwarded the email to David. He called me within minutes. Ella, this is incredible, he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. If this is authentic, it blows their case out of the water. But the source, an anonymous email, is not admissible in court. We need the original file, and we need to know where it came from. Can you get it? Could I? The thought of confronting Julian filled me with a mixture of hope and dread. If he was helping me, it was the biggest plot twist in our entire fraught history. If it was a trap, I was walking right into it. I decided to take the risk. I texted him. I need to talk to you. Alone. He replied almost instantly. The Cuban Cafe on 8th Street, tomorrow. Noon. The cafe was a small, unassuming place, far from the trendy spots Julian usually frequented. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nursing a cafecito. He looked different without the armor of his designer clothes and smug attitude. He just looked tired. Thanks for meeting me, I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. Don't thank me yet, he said, not meeting my eyes. What do you want, Ella? I took a deep breath. I got an email with a file. It had your initial. He finally looked up. There was no smirk, no condescension, just a profound weariness. And, is it real? I asked. Are you the one who sent it? He stirred his coffee, the tiny spoon clinking against the cup. I'm not an idiot, Ella. I've seen your original sketches. I've seen the dates on your old blog posts. I know her claim is a lie. Then why? I asked, bewildered. Why are you helping me? You've always been right there beside her, cheering her on. He let out a short, bitter laugh. Cheering her on? Or just trying to stay out of the line of fire? You got out. You built your own world. I'm still stuck in hers. Every day, I have to go into that office and push a product I know is garbage, made by people who are treated like slaves, all to fuel her ego. It's corrosive. I was stunned into silence. I had always seen Julian as a willing accomplice, a miniature version of Eleonora. I had never considered that he might be just as trapped as my father, only in a different way. She has a history of this, he continued, his voice low, stealing designs from small, independent artists. A skirt from a designer in Spain, a print from a student in London. She calls it market research. She has a whole team dedicated to it. They find a promising design, make a few tiny changes to avoid an obvious lawsuit, and fast-track it into production. Usually, the original designer is too small, too poor to fight back. With you, she made it personal. The phrase from the email echoed in my mind. Look deeper. There are more files, I said, guessing. More proof. He nodded slowly. On her private server, a whole folder of them. It's her secret playbook. If that ever got out, it wouldn't just be a lawsuit. It would be a corporate scandal of epic proportions. It would destroy the brand's reputation permanently. Can you get them? I asked, my heart hammering. He looked me straight in the eye. For the first time, I felt like I was seeing my real brother. Getting them would be career suicide, and possibly criminal. She would never forgive me. I'd be disinherited, cut off completely. I'd lose everything. Why are you even telling me this? I whispered. Because, he said, and his voice was barely audible. I saw your face that day in the garden, and for the first time I wasn't jealous of your success. I was jealous of your freedom. He stood up, pushing a small, encrypted USB drive across the table. This is a one-time gift, Ella. It has the original file for the Althea dress and 2 other clear-cut cases of theft. It's enough to prove a pattern of behavior to your lawyers. Use it to get her to back down. Don't ask me for anything else. He walked out of the cafe without another word, leaving me staring at the small piece of plastic that held the key to my company's survival. It wasn't a trap. was an act of rebellion, an act of desperation. My arrogant, infuriating brother had just saved me. I gave the drive to David. The effect was instantaneous. He filed a motion to dismiss, attaching the evidence of prior infringement as proof of malicious prosecution. He sent a copy directly to Glamour Pulse's legal team. Their response was swift. 2 days later, David received a call. They were dropping the lawsuit. No settlement, no conditions. They just wanted it to go away. Quietly. We had won. The legal threat was gone. Our investors were relieved, and they released the next round of funding. The final pieces for the mill relocation fell into place. The cloud that had been hanging over us for months had finally lifted, but the victory felt complex. It wasn't a clean win. It was a win built on a secret, on a brother's betrayal of his own mother. I hadn't slain the dragon. I had just found a crack in its armor, a crack created from the inside. A few days later, my father called me. "I need to see you," he said. His voice was grim. We met at a quiet park bench overlooking the bay. He looked terrible. "Eleonora knows," he said without preamble. "She doesn't have proof, but she knows Julian was the one who leaked the files. She's unhinged. She's cut him out of the company, frozen his bank accounts. She's trying to erase him." "Where is he?" I asked, a knot of guilt tightening in my stomach. "He's gone," Richard said, his voice breaking. "He packed a bag and left, didn't say where he was going, just said he needed to breathe." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. "This has to stop, Ella. This war between you and your mother, it's destroying this family, whatever is left of it. She's the one who declared war," I reminded him gently. "I was just trying to build a life." "I know," he sighed, looking out at the water. "I know, I've been a coward. I've stood by and let her run roughshod over everyone, including me. I was so afraid of losing all of this." He gestured at the skyline, at the symbols of wealth and power, "that I lost myself instead." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "This isn't from me, it's from the company. It's a formal investment offer." I looked at him, confused. "An investment in what?" "In you," he said, his voice gaining a new strength. "In Terra Thread. Eleonora is distracted, dealing with the fallout from the lawsuit. The board is getting nervous about her erratic behavior. They see the market shifting. They see your success. They see you as the future. A few of us have been talking. We've formed a small consortium of investors from within Glamour Pulse. We want to fund your acquisition of the mill, not as a loan, as an investment. We want to buy a minority stake in your company." I was speechless. The irony was staggering. The very company that had tried to destroy me was now offering to fund my salvation. Why? I finally managed to ask. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said, "and because it's good business. Eleonora's way is dying, Ella. Your way, it's what's next. I'm choosing a side. I'm choosing the future. I'm choosing my daughter." He stood up, leaving the envelope on the bench beside me. "The offer is real. Think about it." I sat there for a long time after he left, the heavy envelope in my lap. I had my funding. I had my victory. But the lines had become so blurry. My enemy's son was my secret savior. My silent father was my new potential partner. The family I had run from was now trying to embrace me, not on their terms, but on mine. The empire wasn't just cracking, it was trying to rebuild itself around me. And I had to decide if I wanted to be its new foundation, or if I wanted to watch it burn to the ground. The offer from my father and his consortium of investors felt like a trick mirror. It showed me a reflection of everything I wanted: the mill secured, Terra Thread financially stable, a victory over Eleonora, but the image was distorted, complicated. Accepting their money felt like a compromise, like letting the enemy into the gates of a city I had fought so hard to build. Yet, denying it felt like cutting off my nose to spite my face. I flew to North Carolina to talk to the one person I knew would give me an honest, unvarnished opinion: Marcus. I found him overseeing the careful disassembly of a vintage loom, each piece being meticulously labeled and crated. The process of the move had begun, a slow, careful migration funded by our initial seed round, but the larger financial questions still loomed. We sat in his now barren office, drinking coffee from paper cups. I laid out the offer from the Glamour Pulse investors, the whole complicated story of Julian's betrayal and my father's awakening. He listened patiently, his gaze fixed on the factory floor. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. 20 years ago, he began, his voice a low rumble, a big box store came to our town. They sold clothes for next to nothing. All the local shops, the ones that sold garments made right here at this mill, they all went out of business within a year. I saw that big box store as the enemy. I hated everything it stood for. He took a sip of his coffee. 10 years ago, that same company's CEO came to me. They wanted to launch a premium American-made denim line. They wanted my fabric. I almost told them to go to hell. "What did you do?" I asked. "I took the meeting," he said. "I realized they weren't the enemy. The enemy was a system, a way of thinking, and that system was starting to show cracks. The CEO, he was like your father. He saw the writing on the wall. He wanted to change but didn't know how, so I sold them my fabric. And you know what? That premium line is still their best seller. It changed a small part of their business, and it kept my lights on for a decade." He turned to look at me, his eyes clear and steady. "Eleonora is your enemy, Ella. A broken system is your enemy. But these men, your father, it sounds to me like they're not trying to co-opt you. It sounds like they're trying to defect. And you, my dear, are the leader of the rebellion. Sometimes, a good leader accepts the surrender of the other side's soldiers. It doesn't make you a traitor, it makes you a general." His words resonated with a deep, simple truth. I had been so focused on the fight, I hadn't considered what winning might actually look like. Winning wasn't about total annihilation. It was about change. And here was a chance to effect change on a scale I had never imagined. I flew back to Miami with a new sense of clarity. I called my father. "I'll take the meeting." The meeting was held in a neutral location, a private room at a downtown law firm. It was me and Sophia on one side of a large oak table, and my father with 3 other grim-faced, middle-aged men in expensive suits on the other. They were all senior executives at Glamourpulse, men I had known my whole life as Eleonora's lieutenants. Today, they looked like conspirators. Richard let another man, a sharp-eyed executive named Robert Miles, do most of the talking. "Ella," Robert began, "let me be frank. Glamourpulse is a battleship, but it's a battleship heading for an iceberg. The market is changing. The ethics of fast fashion are becoming a mainstream concern. The board is getting restless, and Eleonora's recent actions have been erratic and damaging to shareholder confidence. We see Terra Thread not as a competitor, but as a lifeboat, and a blueprint." "A blueprint for what?" Sophia asked, her pen poised over a legal pad. "For the future of Glamourpulse," my father said, speaking for the first time. "We want to invest in you, yes. We want to ensure the mill is saved and your brand thrives. But this is a long-term play. We want to learn from you. We want you to help us change our company from the inside out." The sheer scale of what they were proposing was breathtaking. They didn't just want to invest in Terra Thread. They wanted Terra Thread to be the pilot program for the redemption of Glamourpulse. We spent the next 6 hours hammering out the details. I was uncompromising. I demanded full operational control of my company. I demanded a seat on the Glamourpulse board, specifically on a newly created ethics and sustainability committee. I demanded that their investment be contingent on them hitting a series of publicly reported sustainability targets over the next 5 years. To my astonishment, they agreed. To everything. They were not negotiating, they were capitulating. They knew they needed me more than I needed them. By the end of the day, we had the framework of a deal that would not only secure Terra Thread's future, but would also put me in a position of incredible influence within the very empire I had fought against. As we were packing up our briefcases, I looked at my father. "What about Eleonora?" A shadow passed over his face. "The board is calling a special meeting next week. We're voting to remove her as CEO." The news should have felt like a triumph, but it felt heavy, final. The dragon was finally being dethroned, not by a sword, but by a shareholder vote. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and logistical planning. The deal was signed. The funds were transferred. The new mill, now co-owned by Terra Thread and Marcus Vance, was officially ours. The move began in earnest. The news of the investment and my new role at Glamourpulse sent shockwaves through the industry. The same fashion bloggers who had ignored me or mocked me were now clamoring for interviews. I was no longer the quaint girl with a hobby. I was a power player, the unlikely heir to a fashion dynasty, a reformer from within. I didn't hear from Eleonora. The board meeting happened, and she was officially removed. Richard was appointed interim CEO. The palace coup was complete. I felt no joy in it, only a strange, hollow sense of inevitability. Julian, however, did get in touch. He sent me a postcard from a small town in Costa Rica. It was a picture of a waterfall. The message on the back was simple. "Heard you took over the kingdom. Don't let the crown get too heavy. P.S. It's warm here, and the coffee is good." I smiled. He was finding his freedom just as I was stepping into my power. Maybe, one day, our paths would cross again, not as rivals, but as equals. The grand opening of the new mill was 6 months later. We christened it the Vance Lopez Textile Collaborative. It was a state-of-the-art facility, powered by solar energy, with a water recycling system that was the first of its kind in the industry. We had not only saved the mill, we had made it better. The launch party was a huge event. Industry press, investors, local politicians, and our entire team were there. My father gave a speech, his voice filled with a pride that was deep and genuine. Marcus gave a speech, tears in his eyes as he thanked the community and his team. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd, at all the faces that represented this incredible journey. I saw Sophia, my partner in crime, beaming from the front row. I saw the faces of the mill workers, their jobs and legacy secure. I saw my father, no longer a shadow, but a man standing in his own light. Fashion shouldn't be disposable, I said, my voice clear and strong. It should be a story. A story of the hands that sheared the wool, the hands that spun the thread, the hands that wove the fabric, and the hands that stitched the garment. For too long, that story has been a tragedy of exploitation and waste. Today, we start telling a new story. A story of integrity, of community, of respect for our planet and for each other. Terra Thread was never just about clothes. It was about this idea that the things we make should be as beautiful on the inside as they are on the outside. This mill is the heart of that idea, and it's just the beginning. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, my father found me standing on a catwalk, looking down at the silent looms. "You did it, Ella," he said quietly. "You really did it." "We did it," I corrected him. We stood in a comfortable silence for a moment. "I spoke to your mother," he said, his voice hesitant. I tensed. "And she's not well, she's lost. That company was her entire identity. Without it, she doesn't know who she is. She asked about you." "What did she ask?" "She wanted to know if you were happy." The question was so unexpected, so human. It pierced through the layers of anger and resentment I still held. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I thought you were," he said. "Are you, Ella, happy?" I looked out at the vast, beautiful facility, a testament to a fight I had won against all odds. I thought about the community we had built, the purpose that drove me every single day. I thought about the postcard from my brother, a sign of hope for a different kind of family. "I am," I said, and the words felt true, solid, and real. "I really am," he nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "Good, that's all that matters." A new chapter was beginning. The war was over, but the work of building a new world, a better world, had just begun. I was no longer just the adopted daughter, the outsider. I had found my place, not by fitting into the family I was given, but by building a new one around the values I held dear. The empire hadn't been destroyed. It had been reborn, and I was at its helm. The glow of the mill's grand opening lasted for about a month. It was a period of heady optimism, of glowing press releases and congratulatory emails. We were the darlings of the sustainable fashion world, a real-life fairy tale. But fairy tales end, and the hard, unglamorous work of reality begins. My new reality was a calendar packed with board meetings, budget reviews, and endless PowerPoint presentations. I had a seat at the table, but the table was in a sterile, air-conditioned room 1,000 miles away from the hum of a sewing machine. My first real taste of the resistance came during a quarterly strategy meeting for Glamour Pulse. I was presenting my proposal for a complete, transparent audit of our top 100 suppliers. It was the first step in the multi-year plan the board had agreed to. I had charts, data, and a clear, phased approach. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. Then Frank Morrison, the executive VP of Global Supply Chain, cleared his throat. Frank was a company man, a lifer who had started in the stockroom 30 years ago and worked his way to the top. He was a master of logistics, a genius at shaving 1/10 of a cent off the cost of a button. He saw the world in spreadsheets, and my proposal was a giant, disruptive wrench in his perfectly calibrated machine. "Ella, with all due respect," he began, his tone patronizingly patient, "your passion is admirable, but your proposal is unfeasible. The level of intrusive auditing you're suggesting would violate our agreements with dozens of our long-term partners. They would see it as a sign of mistrust. Many would simply walk away. If a supplier isn't willing to be transparent about their labor practices and environmental impact, Frank, then they're not a partner we should want," I countered, keeping my voice steady. "These partners," Frank said, leaning into the microphone, "represent 40% of our manufacturing capacity. Finding and vetting replacements would take years. Years. In the meantime, our production would grind to a halt. Our stock would plummet. You're asking us to commit corporate suicide out of what? A vague sense of idealism?" A murmur of agreement went around the table. These were the men who had backed me, but they were businessmen first. Frank was speaking their language: risk, numbers, shareholder value. My father, sitting at the head of the table as interim CEO, shifted in his seat. Frank has a point, Ella. The scale of this, we have to be realistic about the disruption. I felt a flash of frustration. This was the fight right here. Not in a courtroom, but in a boardroom, against the inertia of the way things have always been done. Being realistic is understanding that the biggest risk of all is inaction, I said, addressing the whole room. Consumer trust is our most valuable asset. Every exposé about a factory fire, every article about polluted rivers, it erodes that trust. We are one scandal away from becoming the next corporate pariah. An audit isn't a risk, it's an insurance policy. It's not idealism, it's long-term brand survival. I managed to win a partial victory that day. They agreed to a pilot program, an audit of just 10 suppliers. It was a compromise, a frustratingly small step, but it was a step. The weeks that followed were a lesson in corporate trench warfare. The reports I received from Frank's department were superficial, filled with boilerplate language and doctored photos. Meetings were mysteriously canceled. Key personnel were always on vacation when my team tried to schedule site visits. Frank wasn't just resistant, he was actively sabotaging the program. He was protecting his kingdom, a kingdom built on the very opacity I was trying to dismantle. One evening, my father asked me to stay behind after a particularly grueling meeting. "He's fighting you every step of the way, isn't he?" Richard said, loosening his tie. "He's a symptom of the problem, Dad," I sighed, sinking into a chair. "The entire culture here is built on speed and cost. Anything that threatens that is seen as an enemy." "The board is getting nervous, Ella," he admitted, his voice low. "The last quarter's numbers were flat. They're hearing Frank's warnings about disruption. They believed in your vision, but they're terrified of the transition. They want the promised land, but they don't want to cross the desert to get there." It was the first time he had been so candid about the pressure he was under. He was caught in the middle, trying to broker a peace between the past and the future. "So what do you want me to do?" I asked. "Back down?" "No," he said, surprising me. "I want you to be smarter. You can't change the whole battleship at once. It's too big, too slow. So build a speedboat. Build something fast and new that can run circles around the old guard. Show them, don't just tell them." His words sparked an idea that was so simple, so obvious, I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it before. I spent the next week working feverishly with Sophia. TerraThread was running smoothly under her leadership, but I needed her strategic brain for this. We drafted a new proposal. I presented it at the next board meeting. "Gentlemen," I began, "I understand your concerns about disrupting our core business. So let's not. Let's build something new alongside it." I clicked to the next slide. I propose we launch a new division within GlamourPulse, a startup incubator funded by the company but run independently by me and my team. We will call it Ray Frame. Our first project will be to launch a capsule collection, TerraThread for GlamourPulse. It will be designed by me, sourced through my transparent supply chain with the Vance Lopez mill, and sold directly on the GlamourPulse website. It will be a proof of concept. We will show you that ethical, sustainable fashion is not only possible on a larger scale, but it is also highly profitable. This time, the reaction was different. I wasn't asking them to tear down their existing machine. I was asking them to let me build a new one, a better one, right beside it. I was speaking their language now: innovation, market testing, new revenue streams. Frank was the only one who objected. "This is a vanity project," he grumbled. "It will divert resources and focus." But the tide had turned. Robert Miles, my father's main ally, spoke up. "I think it's a brilliant idea, a low-risk, high-reward experiment. It gives us a positive story to tell the press, and it gives Ella's model a chance to prove itself." I moved to approve the funding for the Ray Frame initiative. The motion passed. The energy was electric. It felt like the early days in the garage, but with a real budget and a massive platform. We had our speedboat. We set up the Ray Frame headquarters in a different building, creating a cultural firewall between us and the old guard. We hired a small, agile team of young, passionate people who believed in our mission. The TerraThread for GlamourPulse collection was our chance to make a statement. I designed pieces that had the soul of TerraThread, timeless, elegant, made from beautiful, sustainable materials, but were accessible to a broader audience. One night, I was in the Ray Frame studio, draping fabric on a mannequin when my phone rang. It was an international number, Costa Rica. "So I hear you're building an ark to save the family business," Julian's voice said, clear and relaxed. I laughed, a real, unburdened laugh. "Something like that. How's the coffee?" Strong, and the surfing is better. I read about Ray Frame. It's smart, Ella. You're not trying to fight the dragon anymore. You're teaching it to fly. I'm trying, I said, the weight of the past few months settling on me. It's harder than I thought. Of course it is, he said. You're changing a religion, but you're doing it. From the outside, it's pretty incredible to watch. There was a pause. How's Dad? He's trying too, I said. He's a better man than I ever gave him credit for. And her? He asked, the name unspoken but hanging in the air. I don't know, I answered honestly. No one's heard from her. Good, he said, a hint of his old bitterness creeping in. Let her stay a ghost. We talked for almost an hour. He told me about the small coffee farm he was working on, about learning Spanish, about feeling the sun on his skin and not the pressure of a boardroom. He sounded happy. He sounded free. When we hung up, I felt a sense of peace. The wounds in our family were deep, but maybe, just maybe, they were starting to heal. The launch of the capsule collection was a massive success. We used our platform to tell the story behind every piece. The mill where the fabric was made, the wages of the workers, the environmental footprint. It was radical transparency, and customers loved it. The collection sold out in 72 hours. The data was undeniable. Profit margins were higher than Glamour Pulse's core products. Customer engagement was through the roof. I had my proof. My speedboat was not only afloat, it was winning the race. At the next board meeting, the atmosphere was completely different. There was a buzz of excitement. Frank Morrison was silent. I presented the results, and this time there were no objections. My father looked at me from across the table, his eyes shining with a pride that felt more valuable than any stock price. They approved a massive expansion for the Ray Frame initiative. They finally approved the full, company-wide audit, putting it under my direct authority, effectively bypassing Frank. It was a total victory. That night I went home feeling a deep, quiet satisfaction. It had been a long, brutal fight, but I had done it. I had turned the battleship. The work was just beginning, but the path was clear. I was pouring myself a celebratory glass of wine when my personal cell phone, the number only a handful of people had, started ringing. It was a blocked number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello. There was a silence on the other end, just the faint hiss of an open line. Then a voice I hadn't heard in almost a year. A voice that was colder and sharper than I remembered. You have my office, Eleonora said. It wasn't a question. I stood frozen, the wine glass cold in my hand. You have my company, you have my husband, you even took my son. Her voice was low, controlled, but underneath it was a tremor of pure, distilled rage. Did you really think it was over, Ella? Did you really think you could take everything from me and I would just disappear? My hand was shaking so badly that I had to set the wine glass down on the counter before I dropped it. The voice was unmistakable, but it was hollowed out, stripped of its usual authority and filled with something brittle and dangerous. What do you want, Eleonora? I asked, my own voice surprisingly steady. A dry, mirthless laugh crackled through the phone. What do I want? I want my life back, the one you stole. You waltzed into our family, a little charity case, and you systematically took everything that was mine. You think a boardroom vote can erase me? I am Glamour Pulse. It was born from my ambition, my vision. And you've turned it into a hippie sewing circle. I turned it into a company that has a future, I said, my initial shock hardening into resolve. A company that doesn't have to lie about how it makes its clothes. You speak of lies? She spat, her voice venomous. You are the biggest lie of all, the grateful little orphan playing the victim while you plotted to take over. You are more like me than you will ever admit. You are just better at hiding your ambition behind a veil of self-righteousness. The call is over, Eleonora, I said, my patience gone. This is not over, she hissed, just before I ended the call. I will burn it all to the ground before I let you have it. I stood in the silent kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The victory I had been celebrating moments before now felt fragile, illusory. I had taken her crown, but I had forgotten that a dethroned queen with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person in the kingdom. I immediately called my father and then Sophia. I wouldn't hide. I wouldn't face this alone. That was the old Ella. My father was deeply worried. He knew her volatile state better than anyone. Sophia was pragmatic. We need to increase security at the office and at your apartment. She's unhinged, Ella. We have to treat this as a real threat. For the next few days, a cloud of dread hung over everything. I walked into the Ray Frame office with a security guard trailing me. Every blocked call made my stomach clench. It was a miserable way to live, a throwback to the fear I had worked so hard to escape. She was trying to poison my victory, to make me a prisoner of my own success. The confrontation came a week later. I was in the main Ray Frame design studio, a large, open-concept space with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was the heart of our new operation, a place filled with light, collaboration, and creativity. I was reviewing sketches with my head designer when I looked up and saw her. Eleonora was standing in the doorway. She was rail-thin, dressed in a severe black suit, her face pale and gaunt. But her eyes were burning with a cold fire. She walked into the studio, and a hush fell over the room. My security guard moved to intercept her, but I held up a hand. "It's okay, Mark," I said. "I'll handle this." I turned to my team. "Everyone, why don't you take an early lunch?" The room cleared out in a matter of seconds, leaving just the two of us, surrounded by the ghosts of what was and the proof of what is. She walked slowly through the studio, her heels clicking on the polished concrete. She ran a hand over a bolt of organic cotton, her lip curling in disgust. "So this is it. This is what you replaced an empire with, beige." "It's the color of authenticity, Eleonora," I said calmly. "It's the color of a clean conscience." She spun around to face me. "Don't you dare preach to me from my own building. I gave you everything, a name, a home, a family, and you paid me back with this betrayal." "You gave me a roof over my head," I corrected her, my voice rising to meet hers. "But you never gave me a home. A home is a place where you're allowed to be yourself. This house, my house, was a place where I had to hide myself. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a reflection of yourself. And when I refused to be that, you declared me a failure, an embarrassment." "You were," she cried, her voice cracking. "You were throwing away every advantage I gave you to play in the dirt with your pathetic little hobbies." "My pathetic little hobby is now the most profitable and fastest-growing division of this company," I shot back. "While your part of the empire was rotting from the inside out with lies and exploitation, I didn't steal anything from you, Eleonora. I built something new out of the rubble you were creating." We stood there, face to face, the air thick with years of unspoken resentment. In that moment, looking into her eyes, I saw past the rage. For the first time, I saw the deep, terrifying fear that was fueling it, the fear of being irrelevant, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of being nothing without her title, without her power. The dragon was just a woman, a desperately unhappy woman who had built her entire world on a foundation of sand. And watching her, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound, aching pity. "You're wrong about me," I said, my voice softening. "I'm not like you. My ambition isn't to conquer, it's to create. And you know what the saddest part of all of this is? You could have been a part of it." She stared at me, confused by my change in tone. "Beneath all the everything," I continued, gesturing vaguely, "you have an incredible eye, you know fashion, you know design. You built Glamourpulse from a small boutique into a global brand. That vision, that drive, it was real. You lost your way. You started chasing profits instead of purpose." I walked over to a design table where a half-finished dress was draped on a mannequin. "I don't want to burn down your legacy, Eleonora. I want to build a better one, and there's a place for you in it if you're willing to see it." She looked at me, her face a mask of suspicion. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. It was a crazy, impulsive idea, but it felt right. "I'm launching a new line, an atelier collection, true couture using only sustainable materials and ethical practices. A line with no budget constraints, focused purely on artistry and innovation. I need a designer to lead it, someone with a legendary eye. Someone who can help me prove that sustainability isn't beige, it's beautiful." I looked her right in the eye. "I want you to do it." She was utterly speechless. She stared at me as if I'd offered her a cup of poison. "You want me to work for you?" she whispered, the words filled with disbelief. "I want you to work with me," I clarified. "On my terms, full transparency, ethical sourcing, no compromises, your vision, our values. It's a chance to build something that lasts. Something we can both be proud of." She just stood there, her carefully constructed armor of rage and resentment cracking. For the first time, I saw a flicker of the woman my father must have fallen in love with all those years ago, brilliant, ambitious, and passionate. A tear, just one, traced a path down her pale cheek. She didn't give me an answer that day. She just turned and walked out of the studio, leaving me alone with my impossible offer hanging in the air. A year passed. Glamourpulse officially rebranded as Ray Frame Inc., a name that signified our new mission. My father retired, content to serve on the board and watch the seeds he helped plant grow. Julian came back from Costa Rica. He didn't want a C-suite job. Instead, he took on the role of leading our sustainable agriculture initiatives, working with coffee and cotton farms in Central America. He had found his purpose, not in a boardroom, but in the soil. And Eleonora. 3 weeks after our confrontation, she walked back into the studio, carrying a sketchbook. She never formally accepted my offer. She just sat down at an empty table and began to draw. Our relationship wasn't easy. It was tense, often silent, and built on a fragile, unspoken truce. But we worked. And the collection she designed, Ray Frame Atelier by Eleonora Lopez, was a masterpiece. It debuted at New York Fashion Week to rave reviews, hailed as a stunning comeback and a new direction for luxury fashion. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to be loved by people who refuse to understand you. But sometimes, true strength isn't just in walking away. It's in having the grace to build a bridge back on your own terms. My family is not perfect. We are a collection of broken pieces, stitched back together in a new and unexpected pattern. But we are a family, bound not by name or obligation, but by a shared purpose. We are defined not by the empire we inherited, but by the one we chose to build together. Success isn't about winning a war. It's about ending the fight. It's about recognizing that the opposite of a broken system isn't a rival system, it's a healed one. You don't have to burn down the past to build a better future. You just need the courage to reframe it, to find the beauty in the flaws, and to weave a new story, thread by thread. My name is Ella Lopez, and this is the story we are weaving together.